NoVox Dance presents Dance Behind the Screen, process production, and social media. Don't forget, say no to the box. Dile no a la caja. 고정관념이란 상자에서 벗어나세요.
Hello, and welcome back to Dance Behind the Screen podcast. This is your co-host, Martheya. I am so excited to be back on the mic with you for our 5th season of the show as your host. If you're missing Yejin, Azaria, and Reina throughout this season, don't worry, they're still busy at work behind the scenes of NoVox Dance. Last season, we went behind the screen of all things dance and film. And this season, we want to go behind the screen of the business of dance. Our goal this season is to help connect the dots between making work and sharing work with an audience. Enjoy the show! Diana, I am so excited to welcome you to Dance Behind the Screen podcast. Your career in fundraising is quite extensive, and as the founder and chief strategist for DMGroupConsulting, your YouTube channel has been a very valuable resource to myself and the team at NoVox Dance. I have to say I especially loved the episode, "We Don't Have Any Donors, What Do We Do?" because that's how we started. So to start us off, can you talk a little bit about your career in fundraising?
Sure. I've been doing fundraising for over 20 years in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and just started by kind of just falling into it. Started as a volunteer fundraiser for a group that I was involved with.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
And then things happened, blah, blah, blah. And then I got my first real professional fundraising job at the University of Dallas. I think I just talked my way into it, honestly, because all I had to offer was my volunteer experience. But that's where I started. I've worked with international organizations like the Salvation Army, down to a small little baby organization in Arlington that was the executive director, marketing director, me, and the program staff. So it's still pretty small, but it's a really impactful organization.
Okay, so I really want to dig into fundraising.
All right.
This is the big question. What is fundraising?
All right, so fundraising is giving people who have a passion for your cause the opportunity to support it.
So I want to get into this even more, and I'm hoping you can share some tips with our audience
Sure.
that they can kind of take away, maybe to use in their own organizations or their own work that they're doing in the field of nonprofits. So I guess my first question is, how do you ask for money? If you could give an example, if you were asking me right now.
Well, first of all, let me just say that before you ask for money, you have to be prepared. Mm-hmm. Okay? So even though you and I, have a friendship, a relationship, I would want to know more about you. I would want to know more about what your interests are. I would start with, where are you in our database? What information do we have on you? Maybe you support to North Texas Giving Day every year, and that's the only time we hear from you. You don't come to any of our programs. You don't volunteer. And it's what else is there about Martheya that we need to know? So we do the research. Google is our friend. Mm-hmm.
And when you're Googling, what are the specific things that you're looking for? Like other organizations you support?
Mm-hmm. I would want to know, what other organizations do you support? Where do you volunteer? Whatever information I gather, whoever I can find out that maybe we have someone in common, maybe you went to school with the same school that our board chair went to, or maybe, we just try to find those connections. Maybe you share a place of worship, maybe, you have kids that go to the same school that somebody else's kids go to that's on our board. So you try to find that commonality, that connection. So let's say my board chair and you have something in common. Well, of course, I'm going to bring my board chair. You may not know each other, but you have something in common. And so that's where you start.
Okay.
That's where you start. And you don't ask.
And do you recommend, I have so many questions for you, but do you recommend asking people to go for coffee? I feel like I've heard it a lot of different ways, that some people can be very turned off by that. And then some people are oh, I'm an open book, I'm happy to meet with you. So what do you recommend is that first like point of contact? Like an email, a written letter, or?
Well, you find out that commonality, and then you figure out, again, let's use my board chair example. So who's the best person to contact you? Is it me, the development director, the lowly development director, or is it our ED, or is it our board chair? So we have that kind of conversation. Internally, okay. Right. And so we say, oh, well, maybe the board chair is the best person to reach out to you. And so she would, email you or call you, maybe see you at a PTA meeting, and have a chance to say, oh, hey, glad to meet you. I'm the board chair for so-and-so, and you've been a supporter. Thank you so much. I'd love to get together with you sometime. Mm-hmm. Maybe our ED will follow up with you. So you're kind of primed a little bit to expect to hear from somebody. Now, let's say that doesn't happen. So then, and the board chair doesn't want to do that. So then it would be either me or the ED that would reach out to you and say, hey, we're reaching out to our donors. We would like to meet with you to find out, ABC, find out, we're doing a survey of our donors. We'd like to know why you're supporting us. Do you have a chance? Do you have time to meet with us? Oh, you don't have, well, how about a quick Zoom call? Oh, sure, everybody will do a Zoom call, So you just kind of feel it out.
Okay, depending on the person.
Yeah, it's going to be totally dependent on how that person responds to you. Another example is when I was with the Salvation Army, my portfolio were not the real high wealth donors, but those that gave like under $5,000, to about $1,000. Very loyal donors, very supportive. I would call them because we would call more than we would email back in those days. And it's like, oh no, you don't need to meet with us. We'll, don't waste your time on us. We're there for you. We love the Army. And I would say, oh no, I really want to meet with you. Blah, blah. So, some you would actually get in front of, and you find out more about their story, and you add that information to your database so that, and this might sound kind of manipulative, and I don't think it is, but again, the more you know about a donor, the better you can help them support your organization.
I kind of want to take this like a few steps back, because a lot of emerging organizations, which is a lot of our listeners, let's say they don't have any donors, or they're looking to find these said donors. It feels like, from my perspective, before you kind of understand this world of fundraising, it feels like it's like this hidden club, and like you have to have the special key to get in to know like how it all works. Do you find that to be true? And if you do, like, what do you recommend for those just getting started?
The NoVox Dance Film Festival, NBFF, is now accepting submissions for its 5th year as an independent film festival. NBFF seeks dance-related films that challenge the possibilities of what dance can look like in video form. NBFF has 4 categories for submissions: short series, general, documentaries, and kids. For more information on how to apply, visit filmfreeway.com/KNOW-VOX Dance Film Festival.
There are a couple of different ways I want to answer this. One is there's a lot of training. You can find training, you can Google, nonprofit training, and there's, it's good and bad and indifferent. I would say the nationally, the best place for professional fundraisers to get training is the University of Indiana Lilly School of Philanthropy. They're the granddaddy of nonprofit training. They were like the first university to have degrees in nonprofit management or whatever their degree thing is. So that's like the very first place. Well, one thing I would say to anybody who thinks they want to form a nonprofit is to not do that until they do their research.
And what do you mean by do their research?
I'm going to tell you right now, is if there is another organization, you want to find out if there's another organization doing what you want to do. And if there is, then you need to and should support that organization. if they're not, I mean, and we're, let's just talk about dance. Not that I know anything about dance, but let's just talk about dance. There are dance troupes in the area in Dallas-Fort Worth, big ones, small ones, in-between ones. There are some that have been around a really long time, and there are some that are really new. There are some that no one's heard of. There's, it's kind of all over the map. So I would say that if, coming out of a dance program or moving to the area and you're a professional dancer and you say, oh, no one's doing what I do, be sure, so be sure of that. And then also, as you're doing that, you are introducing yourself to the dance community. So they know you're here. They know your interest. Okay, so that it serves two purposes. No, they're not doing what I want to do. Great. So then you go through the process of forming the nonprofit. There, again, educate yourself on the process before you engage in the process. There's something I heard recently about, I think it's called slow thinking and acting fast or something like that. But anyways, you do as much prep work before you actually start a project or your action, so that you're prepared, so that you're not going through trial and error, or you're minimizing trial and error. Let's put it that way. So you learn about what's needed to form a 501c3.
How do you recommend, I guess, building out your board?
That's a huge conversation. Certainly, it's got to be people who support the mission. You have to be able to articulate the mission. So if these people, and you start with those closest to you. And maybe you start with family and friends. But that's like that has to be the short term, because when it starts looking at the family business, then you really don't have the credibility. You can start there, okay, but that's not where you want to stay.
I feel like I can speak to NoVox. So Yejin and I are the co-creators, and we co-created NoVox in 2018, and it was just a sole proprietorship for the first 2 years, because we had no idea what we were doing, and we wanted to kind of figure out what even are we as an organization. And we did. I'm proud, so I want to pat ourselves on the back. We did some of that like research, like you're talking about, like who are the people in the areas that we want to serve, who's our audience, like what are we doing, what makes us unique, who wants to support us, things like that. And then that's kind of eventually how we even found out that nonprofit was the route that we wanted to go, because through conversations with people saying, oh, well, we think that you guys should be a nonprofit, like the work you're doing is so service oriented and things like that. And then now I feel like we're at this point. So we've been in a nonprofit, it'll be 2 years this year, and we're starting to kind of expand who I guess is a part of our like decision-making team, if you will, which you're familiar with. We like added an advisory committee. And so this year we have 5 different advisors who are able to like contribute their information. And I have to thank you, because you're the person who, we were meeting for coffee and you were like, you should have an advisory committee. I'm like, wow, I didn't even think about that.
Right.
But now with all of their information, like I feel like just the way we're able to see the future of our organization is so different. Because of like background in finance or background in communications, things that aren't a background with the MFA in dance, which is what our team has. Right. So I think that can be kind of challenging. Like, how do you know when it's time to kind of start letting more people like into that decision-making process?
I have different answers for that. One is you should let them in right away, because you want them theoretically to have some ownership in it. They are part of building it up. They're not dancers, and they know that, but they have other expertise to offer. The other part of that is it's difficult to find people who want to be involved in the ground floor.
Because it's so much more like labor intensive.
Yeah.
It's not just like the fun, here's my idea, and then like 20 people can make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you get it going, you get it going so that you actually have something to show. And that's when I mentioned earlier about people just pay out of their own pocket to get things going. It used to be, and I'm not sure that it's this case much anymore, is foundations would not support a brand new organization for the first 3 years because they wanted to see if it was going to be around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what was hard for us. Luckily, we had those 2 years of like becoming what we were. So we were able in our first year as a nonprofit to actually apply for grants and receive them.
Wow.
But we were very fortunate because I couldn't imagine if it was our first year, like right from the start, trying to apply for things and not getting support in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, they want to see financial history and all this and that. So now I think the doors may be open a little bit more for the brand new organizations. So back on boards for a minute, there's information out there. There's a nonprofit organization called Board Source. I think I might have mentioned that to you before. It's a subscription membership organization, so that it's not free to get their information. But you, like if you work with a consultant, that consultant probably has a subscription to Board Source, and they can access some of that information that you might need. But it's the things like they have examples of bylaws. They have job descriptions for board members. They have agenda examples, So it's a lot of really useful information for boards. One of the things that they provide is, and have training on at different times, is board governance, board recruitment, nominations, and what that process is. So we're talking about the, accountant or a banker or finance person. You have a board matrix. You figure out and you lay out, what do you need and what do you want? You want to have, gender equity. You want to have, race and ethnicity equity, probably. That'd be good. But you also want to have diversity in professions. So, and all of those people and all those different types of people need to love dance. That's what brings them all together. That's what brings them to want to give their expertise.
It sounds like it's like a similar mindset, kind of in how you're thinking about relationships with donors. It's the similar mindset in how you think about relationships with those who would serve on your board.
Right. And they also need to donate. They're your top donors. They're going to be that inner circle. Okay. And if your board doesn't give, why should anybody else give?
And I did learn recently that like certain organizations have like a requirement, like an amount, a dollar amount that they require their board to give annually.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting.
That's the old model, I mean like 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, is to get and give. You get money and you give money. Or you get off. It's like really harsh. And those where the thresholds came in. That was and still is a way of keeping people out. Because if someone can't contribute $5,000, $10,000, or even $1,000, or whatever it is, you
lose them.
Exactly. But you can be creative about that. Let's say that, and I'm just say 5,000 because it's an easy number. Let's say that the threshold for board giving is $5,000. Well, okay, I can do that, but I can't do it in like one chunk. So I should be able to make monthly donations that, go toward my board pledge. Okay. So that's one way to deal with it. But I think the best way, and it's not just me, it is a best practice, that board members are asked to give a significant gift. What is significant for you is not going to be the same as what is significant for me. That happens by the board chair, and maybe even along with the ED, but not necessarily. Meeting with each board member, one-on-one, with some privacy or not, depends on the people involved. But so I would meet with you and say, okay, what can you support? What kind of support can you give the organization this year? What kind of financial support? Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about what your company's going to pay. Yes, we want that money too. But what is your personally significant gift that you are giving to this organization?
NoVox Dance is now on Patreon. Gain access to our community resources, early access to Dance Behind the Screen podcast episodes like this one, membership in our creative book club, personalized dance film feedback, and more. Visit patreon.com/KNOWVOXDance to select the membership level that is right for you.
Okay, my last question about fundraising. What fundraising benefits does a nonprofit organization have that other models, like maybe an LLC or a sole proprietorship, don't?
Well, the big difference between nonprofits and for-profits is one side has donors and the other side has investors. Mm-hmm. And so investors have, certain tax benefits, and donors have other tax benefits. So you can, if you donate you have to donate it at a certain amount and above to get those tax benefits. Okay, but that's one difference that I would point out. I think it depends on the people wanting to organize their structure. Do they want to deal with investors who expect a return on their dollar? Or do they want to deal with or depend on donors who are passionate about their mission and don't expect any sort of return on their dollar?
That's helpful to clarify, especially I think for emerging artists who are trying to kind of negotiate what path might make the most sense. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's a really clear, concrete way of kind of differing between the two.
Yeah. And let me say one other thing really quick is that there are now some organizations that are kind of combining the nonprofit and for-profit models. I'm not, I don't have the expertise in that area, but there are ways that, upcoming generations are looking at things a little bit differently and seeing an investment in a nonprofit, not a donation. Mm-hmm. And there's another path where a nonprofit can have earned income. And that's not new. I mean, Salvation Army thrift stores, that's earned income. So it's a very old model that nonprofits kind of ignore. It's like selling t-shirts on your website. That's earned income. Mm-hmm. That's not a donation necessarily. Mm-hmm. So there's ways to earn money as well as to accept donated funds.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think, a common people kind of misconstrue sometimes when you're saying you're a nonprofit that you can't have earned income, right, or like have ticket sales and things like that. Right. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Right.
Okay, so I want to dig a little bit deeper into talking about a donor base, and then we'll jump into CRMs. So you've talked a lot about kind of building these specific relationships with people, and how you might approach that. But what do you think is the most important thing to communicate to donors?
The most important thing to communicate to donors is that you are fulfilling your mission. And that you show it, that you communicate that on a consistent basis. I think that's one of the things that often gets, pushed onto the back burner is letting people know what you're doing. Newsletters are so important, an electronic newsletter, and it doesn't have to be fancy, but so long as it's consistent. I mean, it can be quarterly, it can be twice a year, it can be once a month. Just be consistent. Share what's going on with your organization. Share those good, heartwarming stories, and share, what the challenges are as well. People want to know what's going on. They don't want you begging. They don't always want to say, oh, we need this, we need this, we need this. But you balance that with the good that you're doing in the community. The programs you do, the performances, the classes, whatever it is, to share that information.
Okay, so now I want to dig into CRMs, which I have to admit, I did not know what a CRM was until I met you, which is, I guess, embarrassing. I don't know. It was definitely a trial and error thing for us at NoVox, understanding what that is. I will say we had a documented list, like an Excel spreadsheet of everybody that we connected with, their names, emails, addresses, and we did have notes in there too. So we had one. We just didn't really know what that was. So for our listeners, can you explain what a CRM is?
Okay, so CRM stands for either customer or client. Relationship management system. Okay. So it's a way of getting off of an Excel spreadsheet. Luckily, those can be imported. But it's a way to manage your data. When you start talking to, I don't know, pick a number, more than 20 people or more than 50 people or 100, you're going to lose track. And to have that information in a place where you can do a search. You can find out, where, John and Mary Smith, that you have their address, that you have their contact information. You have a list of their donations. You have a list of every time you've communicated with them. Those newsletters that you send electronically communicate with your CRM that they receive that newsletter. And then every time you talk to them, you enter a note. So that the next time you talk with them, which might be 2 months down the road, you can look back on the record and say, oh yeah, we talked about blah, blah, blah. I need to remember to ask them about this. So it's keeping that information because people expect you to know. If I met with you, 3 months ago, and you want to meet with me again, my assumption is you're following up on whatever it is that we said. Okay, and that you should know that. I don't need to know that. You need to know that.
Right.
So it's a way of keeping track of that. It's also a way of pulling reports, so that you pull a report for your donations per quarter. You're able to sort information, by how many donors do we have in this zip code. So it's very useful. You can sort your Excel file. You can do certain things with it, but at some point it's going to get cumbersome.
Do you think social media is influencing the dance world? And if so, does social media influence your work?
Definitely. I think it influences everything and has and will continue to. Social media is used in marketing and in fundraising. There's the Facebook fundraisers, people say, for my birthday, I'm going to raise, those are important, maybe not in the dollar amount raised, but in the awareness that it helps to spread about different organizations. So yeah, it does. Social media does influence. I'm assuming it influences dance as well, because it influences everything.
How do you say no to the box?
Well, I love to think outside the box. I love to brainstorm. I love to be with a group of people who will just, throw out their ideas. And that it be in this non-judgmental environment, which I've mentioned before. Some people are very uncomfortable with that. So when someone, starts, coming up with reasons why that idea is not a good idea, it's like, I know it's just an idea, let's just put those ideas out there. So, I like working with other people who can freely express and accept crazy ideas.
Me too. Okay, so our last segment of the interview is where we ask all our guests to answer 4 questions in a flash.
Oh.
Are you ready?
I'm not a flash person, but go ahead.
Okay, let's try. If you had to recommend a resource to our audience, what would it be? A book, a podcast, someone to follow, other than your own?
I think there's a really good book called The Ask by Laura Fredericks.
Great. What was the first dance you saw?
Ever in my whole life?
Yes.
Probably in high school, and I don't know.
Do you think social media has a positive influence on the dance world? Yes or no?
I don't know. I don't know.
And what is your favorite social media platform?
Well, I'm of the generation where Facebook is the one I spend most of the time on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, your YouTube is my favorite.
Oh, thank you.
So, as we close, how can our listeners stay connected with you? And can you share a little bit about DM Group Consulting?
I am a Dallas-based consulting firm that works with nonprofit organizations. I have a website, DMGroupConsulting.com, that they can get in touch with me there. And I really work with nonprofits on their fundraising and strategic planning strategies, as well as board governance training.
Wonderful. And check out that YouTube channel. We'll, of course, link everything for you all in the show notes. Thank you so much, Diana, for coming on. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners that you feel like we didn't talk about today?
Fundraising and nonprofit is work that takes consistent effort. That's the thing I would say, is just be consistent in whatever it is you do.
That's a great reminder. Well, thanks again, Diana, for coming on.
You're welcome.
Dance Behind the Screen podcast is produced by NoVox Dance, an art service organization that creates, collaborates, and discusses art with artists and the public. Dance Behind the Screen podcast is co-hosted by Azaria Hogans, Raina Mondragon, Martheya Nygaard, and Yejin Choi, with sound design by Daniel Rosas.
Thanks for taking your time to tune into Dance Behind the Screen, a bi-monthly interview series where we go behind the screen to question process, product, and social media. Be sure to follow us on social media at KNOWBoxDance. See you next time, and don't forget to say no to the box.